Hi, I'm Devin, and I want to talk a little bit about why I left my licensure path in psychotherapy to look for a home that felt a little more holistic for me. By background, I trained in clinical social work. I'm an LMSW in New York, which means I can practice psychotherapy under supervision. If I do that for long enough, I can practice outside of supervision. I have training at an LGBT psychotherapy center in addition to my education background. And I think maybe the most important thing to start with is, what is psychotherapy? And I think, like most people, when I started my training, I thought psychotherapy was something different than it is. In my mind, psychotherapy was this space where people learn about themselves, love themselves, grow, and learn. And I think there is a lot of that in psychotherapy. But legally, what psychotherapy is the legal right to diagnose the client with a disorder, and then the creation of a treatment plan against symptoms of that disorder or anything around them that the therapist is saying is maladaptive. So inherently, psychotherapy is medical. It is saying there is something wrong with the client and then using speech and behavioral work to move along that thing that is wrong with the client. And what happens in the therapy room could be really anything. There are therapists who do cognitive behavioral therapy, there are somatic therapists like I was, there are psychoanalysts, there are witches in the therapy room who pull tarot and incorporate mediumship. All of that is not actually what defines psychotherapy. What defines psychotherapy is the right to diagnosis, which I didn't understand when I started my training, because what I fell in love with was the other part, the relationship, the seeing yourself, the working on yourself. And so as I was training, I kept thinking to myself, I don't really like it here in the world of diagnosis. And so I, at the end of it, decided I didn't want to stay. There were just too many things pulling me away, and I wanted to make something that felt more true to me. And for me right now, that is body wisdom coaching. So it's a lot of what happens in the room of psychotherapy in terms of talk, but it removes the diagnosis. It removes the idea that the client is ill or something about them is maladaptive or that I need to fix or correct them, which is the defining trait of psychotherapy. So what I want to do is talk you through the reason psychotherapy didn't feel like a home for me. But the first thing, I do want to draw a broad caveat that there are so many psychotherapists who agree with what I'm about to say, and they work in the field subverting a lot of these structural components of psychotherapy, and they do brilliant work. And I think they find a way to make peace with the ways maybe their practice doesn't align to the law of psychotherapy. I eventually found I wasn't comfortable with that trade-off. I didn't really want to be subverting a system. I wanted to be in a system that felt more values aligned for me. So the first thing I want to talk about was the thing that kind of broke the camel's back for me, which is that I want to integrate bodywork. I studied bodywork. I'm in the process of becoming a licensed massage therapist in New York, which is the most restrictive state in the country. It requires 1,000 training hours in person in addition to the not in-person training. I'm about 700 hours in now. And I learned cranial sacral therapy while I was studying psychotherapy, and for me, seeing the ability to move through the layers of fascial restriction with active dialoguing, for me showed this whole realm of healing or growth or transformation that was just not accessible in speech alone. And I immediately signed up for a massage program. I've become obsessed with body work. I think it's so powerful. I cannot legally do body work with a psychotherapy client. I am a licensed social worker, so there is a no exceptions rule in my ethical code that I may have no dual relationship with a client. And dual relationship is very expansive in the definition. I cannot do anything other than psychotherapy with them. That includes what you might think is normal of like, don't take my friends as clients. But it also means if I have a psychotherapy client, they could not attend a yoga class I was teaching. If I was hosting a retreat for mental health resets, they could not come to that retreat. And if I am a licensed body worker, even though I'm allowed to touch someone in the state for work, I would not be allowed to touch a psychotherapist because they cannot work with me under a second license. And for me, that was a non-negotiable. I need to be able to integrate bodywork into my future work, and psychotherapy, in a very firm way, stopped me from doing that. So that was kind of the thing that broke the camel's back for me. But leading up to that kind of starkness, I had a lot of things that I was just feeling really uncomfortable with in psychotherapy. And so the first is that I disagree with diagnosis. And diagnosis is legally what psychotherapy is. It's diagnosis, treatment against diagnosis. So when I trained in psychotherapy, I learned the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual for Psychological Disorders. And it's just a bullshit book. It's like truly garbage. It's meaningless. So the way the DSM works is they lump symptoms under a name. They're not diseases in the sense that they say this is what causes it, or this is the etiology of it, this is what is happening at its core. They are saying like, this is a set of things we see and this is how we're going to name it. So if you're experiencing like lots of sadness for more than 2 years, but it's not fallen into major depressive, maybe we're going to call it persistent depressive disorder. But if it's fallen into something really, really severe, even if it's shorter term, and it's stopping you from living life, maybe it's a major depressive disorder. If you're experiencing a lot of anxiety and it's disrupting things, and the therapist thinks it's disproportionate to your life, we can call it generalized anxiety disorder. If it's specific to social situations, it's social anxiety disorder. These are just descriptive names. There's no agreed upon biological mediator in terms of what's happening below the surface. And for every client I worked with, their emotions were adaptive normative responses to their lived experience. And so for me, the DSM was just coming in and calling what was a reasonable response to their life as a disorder, and I just couldn't agree with that. I fundamentally see people's bodies as having wisdom. If they're having physical pain, it's a signal to work on that area of the body or rest it or seek care. If they're having an emotion, it's suggesting that they have a need in their life that needs to be met. If they're having a thought, it is goal directed. It is using the cognitive process to push the client towards a behavior. All of these things store wisdom because it's a body working to protect itself. And so for me, none of these things make sense to pathologize. They are better to be understood. And when I was practicing psychotherapy, I realized looking back, I really wasn't practicing psychotherapy. I was just taking insurance. Because I would say this to the client, and then we would work with their emotions and their thoughts as normative adaptive responses and try to tap into body wisdom. That is inherently subversive. I'm trying to subvert the system, theoretically, potentially, by putting diagnoses I don't agree with, which could be insurance fraud. I really wanted to work with my clients from the position that who they are is exactly who they need to be today, and that whatever is firing in their body is firing for a reason, and we can try to understand that and grow from that and learn from that. And while there are therapists willing to subvert the nature of psychotherapy, which is strictly counter to that idea, I wanted to be in my own space where I can just have that firmly as the basis, where there is no implicit or implied curriculum or paperwork in the background that says something different. I wanted the firm foundation of my work to be that my client is fine as they are. We might try to understand them better. We might try to move their life in a way of ease or empowerment or something like that, but who they are today is exactly who they need to be today. And I was tired of compromising that. Similarly, I want to build self-trust in my clients. And I think because of this DSM language, therapy either explicitly or implicitly tells clients that their body is misfiring in some ways, that there's something wrong with their emotions or their thoughts or their behavior patterns, as opposed to thinking that there's kind of wisdom in them, that there's a reason for everything happening. And sometimes it goes like really in an extreme where you're in cognitive behavioral theory and you're just labeling things as thought distortions. You're reframing them in another way. And I think that really erodes client self-trust. Because maybe if we just put on our rational brain, we can make the case that something is an irrational belief. But usually, if we dig deeper and we look at the way the client's body perceived their life experiences, it's not irrational. It's coming from a real lived experience. And now, based on their lived experience, their body is engaging in pattern recognition and seeing things and other things. And sometimes they're seeing the right things, it's just that society is uncomfortable or afraid to see them as well. And for me, I didn't want to engage in this practice where clients are telling themselves facts aren't feelings and thoughts aren't true. Because on one side that's true, but on the other side, feelings and thoughts are goal-directed neurological fires from our body. They're coming to be listened to. And when anyone I have worked with starts listening to those, they start to see why they're firing. They just start to understand their body. They start to listen to their own needs. And then they start living more self-responsibly. And usually when this happens, those thoughts and those feelings that are feeling disturbing, they start quieting, even if that wasn't the goal, because they're being listened to. The attention they were trying to draw to the body is being drawn, and slowly the client is operating from a place where they think, oh, I'm not just crazy. I'm not just like firing all these things that make no sense. They start to think, my body makes sense. I can understand it. I can work with it. And I really wanted that to be the foundation of my work. I also wanted my work to be anti-normative. And there are certainly anti-normative psychotherapists, but the structures of psychotherapy themselves are highly normative. And this stems from the DSM. The DSM, in my mind, is just listings of symptoms that are inconvenient for society as structured. It's not really to do with if they're having a reasonable reaction. We put like the behaviors we think of as antisocial and we'll classify them in some way. So if that antisocial is externalizing, if it's vandalizing a store or committing theft, maybe they have conduct disorder. If that is internalizing and they're paralyzed and they can't do anything, but they can't work, then we're going to call it major depressive disorder. If they are struggling to go outside and engage in society, we'll call it social anxiety disorder. These are all extremely normative things. The kind of definition of a disorder is they are not functioning as we want them to in society. But if we blow that up and we ask, should they be functioning as we want them to, it's totally different. It's kind of a hard world to live in right now, and so it makes sense to have some level of sadness, of disappointment, of confusion, of powerlessness. It makes sense that we are all wanting to engage in some level of social resistance. And just because it's inconvenient for capitalism or inconvenient for a government as it exists today doesn't mean it's a disorder. And that, for me, I wanted to be core to my work. And certainly there are therapists who are anti-normative. This is core to their work, but at the same time, they're in a structure that is built to uphold capitalism, to uphold colonialism, by nature of labeling anything that is disturbing or distressing to those systems as a disorder. Whereas when I work with my clients, I want to consider how whatever is arising in their body, physical sensations, emotions, thoughts, how it's arising in response and collaboratively with their environment, what it's telling them about its environment, and what it's telling them about the ways they might need to move or change or work in activism for that environment. And the other part of my desire to be anti-normative is my desire to be anti-colonial and look at ancient wisdom practices. There is this kind of hard foundation of psychotherapy that psychotherapy started with Freud. And there are lots of psychotherapists who know this is bullshit, but it's still like structurally a part of it. You go through licensure, you have to get tested on Freud, no matter how stupid it is, because he's the father of psychotherapy. But he's the father of kind of like taking ancient wisdom and relabeling it and renaming it in a way that was palatable in that area of Europe at that time. I have yet to meet a single concept in psychotherapy that didn't exist in another form in an ancient wisdom practice. Even I was a somatic therapist, I'm a somatic practitioner now. Our theories of regulation right now essentially reduce to concepts of working with the first three chakras. I have yet to find something other than new phrasing or a new way of conceptualizing something that added to the wisdom of regulating the first three chakras in terms of kind of the standards of somatics. Concepts like negative core beliefs or burdens or introjections, those existed as words in Sanskrit thousands of years ago. But right now there's just kind of a rush to be the first person to say it in a new way, and then you can publish it in a peer-reviewed journal, and all of a sudden, because it's Western wisdom, it's new and it's more important, and we erase its origins, we erase the people who've said it before, and at the same time we deride them. And so we're taking these ancient wisdom practices, putting them through licensure, where we have new and often shallow or non-subtle understandings of them. And that for me is just so full of hubris. I like learning some of the modern theory. I think the language is so digestible for a modern audience because that's what we grew up in. But I also want to understand how people have been thinking about this for thousands of years and what practices sustained for thousands of years, because psychotherapy is very new. It is less than 200 years old. So it hasn't withstood the test of time yet. And so for me, anti-normativity includes looking elsewhere, looking back in history, broadening my definition of what healing is. Which brings me to, I want to make my work feel normal. I really worry psychotherapy creates a sense of isolation because it medicalizes normal relationships. Well, psychotherapy glorifies analysis and case conceptualization and behaviorism. The research kind of suggests that doesn't matter. That what matters in the room is that you're very attuned to another human being. That human being is seeing you and making space for you, and in that space you can move. And it's very appealing in the modern world to see a therapist solely because it's hard to find this in a normal social connection. But there's nothing that says this is medical, and I really don't like the kind of implicit statement of psychotherapy that being with someone who is warm and inviting and non-judgmental and accepting is actually medical treatment. That doesn't mean people shouldn't pay for it, but this thing that makes psychotherapy helpful. In a better world, we would have it with our parents, we would have it with our friends. We could get it when we go to the grocery store because the cashier might meet us with a really warm, true, genuine smile. And I don't like contributing to this world in which somehow it's not normal. It's medical. It's something we need to pay for. It's something that needs to be bifurcated off. I want to be part of moving this into daily life. I want to teach my clients the skills of doing what I do for them with all of their friends, and so we can kind of just create this web of people and maybe eventually escape this world where we each pay someone $100, $200 a week because we have inadequate support in our day-to-day life. Which brings me to this. I don't want to be needed. I worry there's something in psychotherapy that is just predatory in its marketing. It's quite easy to sell it because you're diagnosing, and so what you're doing is saying, you are ill, you are sick, I can fix you. And that's a very easy like a sales tactic. If people are just more likely to sign on the dotted line if they feel like you're a necessity. And then the therapist feels self-important because they're the one person who can understand, the one person who can heal this client. I'm distrustful of my value, and I love that people are willing to pay money to spend an hour with me and that they think I help them. But I also think we might only need that in this social moment because people don't know how to relate to each other. That might change in 10 years. And I'm not sure it's necessary for everyone. And we keep saying like everyone should be in psychotherapy, and I'm just not sure that's true because I'm not sure it has adequate value to everyone. When we start comparing it with things like fitness, with massage, with peer support groups, with dancing, with play, I don't know what the differential value is of psychotherapy over something else. I don't know if people should be seeing a psychotherapist every week, seeing me every week. It is great when I can add value, but I want that value to be questioned. I want to earn my space in your life if you are paying me. And the default in psychotherapy is that you just see someone every week for years. In the same way that you might take an antidepressant every day for years, it's a dependency. It is a you need me because you are ill. And I didn't want to be a part of this kind of marketing scheme. I want my clients to be asking if it's worth spending the money to see me or if they need to go and get a personal trainer for the next 3 months. Because sometimes talking about it is not the thing that needs to happen. Sometimes we have all the insight we need for the next year of behavior, and so the supports we need change. And I wanted my work to be open to that. Which brings me to the cost of psychotherapy. I want to disrupt the monopoly. There are psychotherapists in New York who charge $400 an hour. And then it's amazing that people are going to pay it, but I'm going to be honest, I don't know if it's worth it. It's just an enormous amount of money. We don't know the differential impact versus other things. I think for most people, they would get equal value from seeing the personal trainer 3 days a week if they were like a kind person. But this monopoly that's been created sustains the sense that psychotherapy is essential, which I'm not sure it is, and that it should be expensive because the monopoly created a licensure path that doesn't actually protect the client, to limit the supply so that there's only so many of us. And I think that's kind of just being a disservice to absolutely everyone. I did the education part of the licensure path, and I have never learned less in an educational setting. Everything I learned about working with clients, I learned through meditation, through yoga, through bodywork, through active practice. And then in school, I just learned outdated theory. It was extremely performative. And then when you go through the licensure path, the core thing is that you get supervised 1 hour a week, but the research says supervision doesn't help client outcomes. And so really what we have is a system that makes you pay $100,000 to get educated, then go through an extremely exploitative path towards licensure. The whole time not acquiring any skills that gain a client, because the skills that gain a client are relational, and you actually spend your whole time learning theory. And so at the end of it, we have a highly privileged class who could afford to take those 4 to 9 years of their life and go through that licensure path. And the skill that is helping their client is the skill that existed pre-licensure. We have extremely warm lovely people who create these spacious relationships without licensure, and if the research is true, they would help someone just as much sitting with them for an hour as a psychotherapist, because it's the non-judgment, the sitting, that's the important part, not the theory. The theory actually does not help the client. It doesn't matter what theory you use, it doesn't matter what modality you use, but in the process of monopolizing it, of creating this licensure, we've glorified the modality, we've glorified the way we talk about it, we've made it special, and we've limited the supply, and then we've managed through predatory marketing to say it's required, and then we've made it inaccessible too. So for the people who need it most often can't afford it. And I want to disrupt that. Not that my services are cheap, but I do offer pay-by-your-means services, and I want to normalize the idea of things outside of therapy. So right now I call it coaching, right? Anyone who is a beautiful human can do it and call it coaching. Do exactly what I do, and they might be at a different stage in their career where they charge $30 an hour, and then they're actually really helping people, and all of a sudden help and healing becomes more accessible because it's breaking down the monopoly. And I want to be a part of that. I want better theory. I really think psychotherapy is just stuck in psychoanalytical bullshit. The basic tenet of psychotherapy, as it is structurally, and again, psychotherapists can do anything they want in the room, is that if you understand the client, you fix the client. And I just think this is bullshit, because I don't think we can ever be understood. There's just too many factors, and we are always changing. And the problem with trying to understand ourselves is that the minute we understand ourselves, our ego starts internalizing that information to limit us to that ego identification. And so the practice of trying to understand ourselves boxes ourselves in. And this is the nature of psychotherapy theory. Instead, I am drawn to body-mind connection theory, bodywork theories, which are how is the body adapting to its lived experience. And so if you work in bodywork and you look at neurological firing, the body is being just custom built for its environment, to survive in that environment all the time. We are just who we are responding to the environment in. And if we gain the skill sets instead of relating to this nature as opposed to defining ourselves by it, the world changes, it opens up. Because who I am right now, if I can just sit softly in it, is just a biological set of adaptations to the way I behave in response to my environment. And there's so much good theory on this. And then there's so much good theory about what it means to move out of that. Because if we developed into this biological form in response to it, there's nothing really stopping us from the next biological form. And we don't have a theory of like if there's a core of us below that. It's certainly in spiritual traditions, the ideas of souls, the idea of higher chakras, we have a tether to higher consciousness, which has maybe more permanence, maybe a Sudharma, a purpose on this world. But the kind of psychotherapy realm where our thoughts are permanent and our ways of thinking, our attachment styles might be permanent, and our current relationship with anxiety, that is just bullshit. And I am tired of being in a structure that props that up as something substantial. I want the possibility of real relationships. The dual relationship ban stops me from doing body work, but it also stops me from seeing people I know in my life. And I think that's overly restrictive. And I think that's overly restrictive because at a certain point, people need to heal in real relationships. And the bubble of psychotherapy is that you don't know anything about their life. They bring a version of their life in front of you, and you work from that bubble. You work from whatever they're telling you. You have no idea if it's true, and you have no way of checking against external information. You can't cross-validate. You're just working in a bubble. And that can be really helpful for someone who has no existing ability for vulnerability, because there's no real risk at the beginning of doing it. It can be great, like exposure treatment. But at a certain point, to keep growing, you need to start using these skills in a real relationship. And I see no reason that a professional relationship can't coexist with a real relationship for people who are ready for it. My psychotherapist is also a friend, and we work together. And in the US, she would not be considered a psychotherapist, but she lives abroad and has more flexibility with her branding, and she likes that terminology. She would be considered a coach here. And by nature of us having a dual relationship, there are real consequences, there are real teeth whenever I choose to share a dark side of myself, something seedy. If I am angry with her and I'm finding this session unhelpful, I know that it has a risk of rupturing a real relationship, so I'm choosing to engage in real behavior with someone I know has the skills, so that I am still moving along safety as opposed to doing it with a total stranger. But it's more expansive. It allows that next tier, and I think clients and therapists or coaches should have the right to choose if they want to navigate a dual relationship, because certainly, while there are justifications for why a bifurcated bubble can be healing, there are also justifications for times when a dual relationship expands the capacity for healing. I don't want to inflate healthcare costs. I talked about the monopoly earlier. I think therapy is just kind of too expensive. It's self-indulgent. The thing is, we don't have differential studies around what helps in comparison to each other. There's a recent meta-study on treating depression that the best way of treating depression is through dance. It's far more effective than psychotherapy. Certainly that is a cheaper and more scalable solution for working with people who are trapped in their sadness than trying to get everyone into one-on-one therapy. The research in psychotherapy consistently shows that group therapy is as effective as one-on-one therapy, and yet the one that we want to keep scaling is one-on-one therapy. And I think this is because it engages in kind of Western self-importance and Western self-indulgence, because if you are seeing someone one-on-one, you're seeing them once a week, you feel really important, you feel like the center of the world, it's so self-referential. And it's nice. I think it's a luxury. I pay for this because it does help me go deeper every week. I don't know if I think it's healthcare. I think it's a nicety. The healthcare part of it, the thing that is getting people feeling well, I don't know if that needs to be psychotherapy. I certainly don't think it needs to be $200 a week every week for 6 years, because we're just not looking at, does that help as much as a massage? Does that help as much as yoga? Does that help as much as a gym membership? Does that help as much as a peer support group? And we really need to be comparing to these other costs, because psychotherapy is quite greedy. This idea of billing someone every week for many, many years. In New York, your reimbursements can be like $7,000 for the year for one client, and that is the insurance premium almost for a lot of people. At some point, if we want to make healthcare accessible, we have to really start looking at the ways psychotherapy inflates it. And so the way I work now, I see my work as a luxury, an indulgence. It is helpful, it is meaningful, but it's not healthcare. It is something that is nice to have. At a certain point in your life, you can move into deeper, richer meaning because you are so resourced and comfortable, and I will help with that. But I have trouble asking insurance to foot my bills, because I don't see myself as so essential that we need to be putting that much of the money into insurance. I want more privacy. When you're in psychotherapy, you have to take so many notes. At the beginning, you write as much as you can about them. You write their trauma history. You write all about their family. You even write how intelligent you think they are, how you think they're dressed, and then you give them a diagnosis. It's very invasive. And then at the end of every session, you write about what happened. So there's a ton of private information. It's extremely exploitable. And I don't want to keep that many notes. because I really worry about what that means today. In a world where hacking and cybersecurity are increasingly on my mind, I worry about who can get notes about my client. In a world where we see fascism creep and psychotherapists are required by law to disclose their notes when the law says they need to, I worry about how fascist regimes can require those notes to be used against political enemies. So I want to write as little as possible, and I can't do that in psychotherapy. At least not when it's what legally psychotherapy is. I could finish a licensure path, call it psychotherapy, and then just do what I do now, which is coaching. But I'm still structurally in it. So I like having the freedom to write as little as possible, because I don't want a paper trail that could be used against my client in a world where I think that is likely. And last is purely selfish. I want a global life. Psychotherapy licensure, because it's medicalized, it's just the state that you have it in. And I want to be able to travel around the world. I want to be able to live abroad. If fascism entrenches in the US, I want to be able to move. I want to see clients from all the states. I want to see clients from all the countries. I want to hold retreats. And if I leave the medical model, all of a sudden I can do all of that. And I might make a different decision if I didn't have all of these other problems with the structures of psychotherapy. But for a system that I just don't agree with structurally, that I didn't feel like I was home in, I just find a better home, something more global, something easier to travel with, something to bring community from all over the world in the non-medical approach. I know there's a lot that I said about really not liking psychotherapy, and I've said it a few times, and I want to just end by saying it again. There are amazing psychotherapists. There are people who do brilliant work. In my mind, they do brilliant work despite the system and in subversion of the system. And I respect them. I respect that they are comfortable working within the system and pushing for incremental change from within the system. We need people like that. I used to really want to be that kind of person. I think because I wanted to prove that I could be in the system, that I could prove myself worthy of being in the system. But I think we need people both inside and outside of broken systems to be moving them in the ways that people need. And for me, it fits me better outside the system. Well, if you made it through this, which I imagine not many people will, and you are curious to know about me, click subscribe at the bottom of my webpage. Schedule an intake call if you're curious about working together. Look through my blog or my meditations if you're curious about kind of the more thought leadership pieces that I offer. And I'm glad if you listen to this at all. For me, I really struggled with the decision of leaving psychotherapy because I had a dream for it, and I had a dream for myself in it. And choosing what really felt aligned for me took a while, and writing about why I made that choice and talking about it all of a sudden made it feel true for me. I was able to settle into my truth by talking about it. So I send you with good wishes, I send you with kind wishes, and I wish you a beautiful day.